if I would have known that the first time I ever went to go shoot a gun, it was going to affect my life as much as it did, I would have called you up and said, hey, can you bring the film crew out to film me? Because this is going to be a life-changing experience and I want to make sure I have it on camera, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, we're off and rolling. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Open Action. I am, of course, John McClain, and today I have got a really awesome guest that I absolutely love, and you know we've had quite the relationship for a few years now, and we'll talk a little bit about my first memory of how we interacted with each other. But if you've been living under the rock in the firearms industry and you don't ever see anything from Shooting USA, then you won't know my guest. But I'm guessing you haven't been living under a rock, which means that you absolutely know that my guest today is John Scoutten from Shooting USA. John, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, man. Thank you, John, for that warm welcome to Action Open. I love the name. I did not know the video cast was called Action Open.
Open Action. Open Action.
I'm sorry. All right. Well, trademark Action Open, the new Shooting USA production. We're using Riverside, which I've just started dabbling in, and it can be a little challenging from time to time. But by the looks of what I can see on my feed, it's working great. So as long as y'all can hear me, I can see you, and we can get right rocking into this thing, man.
Perfect. Well, so you're based out of Franklin, Tennessee now. Is that correct? Is that where you're located?
Yeah, true story.
Now,
yeah, we're very thankful to be blessed and living here in the beautiful state of Tennessee. And it's an interesting place to be right now because weather is a little challenging. We're in what they call false spring. So winds, storms, so on and so forth. You know a little bit about that being in Missouri.
Yeah, I was about to say, we've been having this weird weather too, where it's like, it's super nice for the days where, like, you know, Kelly's nephew can't come over and play with Nomi. And then as soon as the weekend comes, the temperature drops to the 30s and it's like, oh, never mind. No one's allowed to go outside and hang out. So it's been an interesting ride so far now. Okay. So, before we get into the nitty gritty stuff, you know, down and dirty and whatnot, I gotta ask this: being from that you're in Tennessee, how important is it that you like whiskey?
Well, before anything, I need everybody to understand. I am a Tennessee squire. As a Tennessee squire, I own 1 square inch of property on the Jack Daniel's distillery in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and I've toured the distillery a total of 6 times, twice pre 9/11, which means I got to actually get my face right on top of the mash in the bins. And it's evolved a lot, and that is where my taste for whiskey began. Since then, I have become a massive fan of the products by Jimmy Russell, out of the House of Wild Turkey, Russell's Reserve, and all the way up. I've got an unopened bottle of Russell's 13. None of that is kept here at my office, but in addition to that, I'm a big fan of the House of Buffalo Trace and the things that they make there. I have, interestingly enough, I ran into a guy a couple of years ago now while my wife and I were vacationing in Mexico who, from South Carolina, he knew of the show, and he recognized me. We were at dinner, and we ended up sitting around chatting about all sorts of things related to precision long range competition. And this individual, with a group of his friends, had gone on a trip to Buffalo Trace and done a barrel select, and he had his share of that barrel's worth of bottled single barrel Buffalo Trace. And we chatted about whiskey for so long, chatted about guns for so long, and all of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, here at the office, a bottle of single barrel select Buffalo Trace showed up from that guy. And so that is currently on infinite reserve on my bar now. But it is always fun to have a little half-ounce taste of that against a half-ounce taste of just an off-the-shelf Buffalo Trace, which is a blend, blended Buffalo Trace to their specific profile. And it really, really comes through, the difference in a single barrel versus the blend. I love the blend, love Buffalo Trace. It has gotten a lot of notoriety since being associated with the Joe Rogan podcast, which makes it pretty difficult to find from time to time. And without saying so, I might be a little controversial for our friends in Kentucky, because I know there's a deep shooting culture in Kentucky, and I'm hopeful that many of them listen to you. There's a bit of a vendetta between the distributors. There's not a lot of the really nice stuff out of the Kentucky houses makes it into Tennessee. And that's what I think makes it fun to chase bourbons and chase different whiskeys when we all travel to different destinations for the competitions that we cover for Shooting USA. And of course, you participate in at an elite grandmaster level. For instance, there's a couple of hole-in-the-wall mom-and-pops liquor stores down around the CMP in Alabama. And the last time we went hunting in one of those this past fall, a buddy of mine who's on my crew regularly, Randall Reed, he absolutely scored. He walked around the corner in this little store, and he gave out a holler like there was a rattlesnake in the middle of the floor. And what he actually found was 2 bottles of Blanton's and a bottle of Eagle Rare on the shelf for retail. Bought all of it, obviously. There was a bottle of Weller 12 behind the counter. That came home with me. I paid a little extra for it, but it's worth it. If you can find a Weller 12, that's the beginning of, that's the introduction to what will become the Van Winkle family of whiskeys. So, Pappy Van Winkle comes from Weller Juice, and then they do their after effects. One more I want to mention, and again, you get me talking about whiskey, and
that's why I brought it up, man.
We'll derail this podcast so fast. We need a separate podcast that's just whiskey. I could do it from my whiskey room. I have a whiskey room at the house where I have my record. I have a vinyl collection, and I have my record player in there. I have a leather couch. I have my leather recliner, and then I have a whole array, which I've learned is, I'm kind of still entry level. I've got about 70 selected bourbons in my collection right now. But when you start talking bourbon with people, especially down and around these parts, guys will whip out their phone and you'll see 200-300 bottles. Anyway, I got a bottle of Pappy 12 for Christmas, and as it was gifted, you don't just put that up. You don't put that up and not open it. When it's gifted, it's pretty much, you're obligated to open it and taste it. And I'm telling you, man, it's something special. I've had tastes of Pappy 15 in the past, and I had one occasion with Steve Hornady and Jim Scoutten to taste Pappy 20. And Jim is a big Scotch drinker, and so when Steve poured him that taste of Pappy 20, he took a taste of it, and he said, "Wow, this is sweeter than what I like to drink." And that came right out of his hand so quick. I was like, yeah, for sure. Get him something else. I'll take care of this. Anyway, yeah, love bourbon, love the culture around it, love it when we get to talk to people who are into it. And there's a bunch of guys especially in the pistol sports who are big bourbon heads. So it's fun. It's a good time.
Yeah. So I was not super into bourbon. My preferred drink was Jameson when it came to whiskey.
Remember that?
Right?
Yes.
And that comes back
to that awards ceremony that first year.
Exactly.
You and me and Pete.
Yep, that's right. I that was the first time I placed in the top 10 at a USPSA level event or a national level event. So I was doing a little bit of celebration before the award ceremony, and I happened to have the bottle in my back pocket. And I remember, you came up and you said, "Hey, man, how can I take
excuse me?
Yeah, are you sharing?"
Let me get a little touch of that. Let me get a little pull off of that.
Yep. So
yeah, man, that was you and me and Pete Rinsing in Vegas, if I remember correctly.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, after Multigun Nationals was in Desert Sportsman's, which it's no longer there anymore, but. Yeah, that was the first time. Yeah, that was one of the first times.
So Desert Sportsman's finally rolled up into the neighborhoods that were encroaching all those years. I didn't know.
No, I think they still exist. Just they don't hold matches anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, they kicked all the dangerous match shooting people out. So
man, we got so many memories that go on. I mean, that was the year that Jim Zubiena showed up in that jacket, and I ended up just like completely. Well, maybe it was a year later, but it was one of the final events at Desert Sportsman's for multi-gun, and the famous one of the original GMs from back in the day, Jim Zubiena, shows up. And for those that don't know about his pedigree, he was one of the first guys to take real practical pistol craft into Hollywood, and he was tied in with Michael Mann when they were doing the original Miami Vice, and he actually, as a firearms trainer, worked with Don Johnson and can't can't remember Tubbs' name, the actor that played Tubbs right off the top of my head, but Zubiena ended up with a role in the first season of Miami Vice where he played a hitman, and he does a draw from appendix and puts a Mozambique on a rookie cop who thinks he's got the drop on him. And I end up doing this long format interview with him, and we went and got the video from Miami Vice and all of this. Dude, it's so good. It's just like putting those connections together. But that goes back to those days when we were still out in Vegas on the regular for multi-gun and for the other handgun nationals, man. There were so many years that we were there. The Orleans Hotel, you remember staying at the Orleans? Oh, you lived out there back then. You were still in Vegas at that time.
Yep, I was, and I got to say I don't miss it. If I had to move to Missouri in my 20s, I would have been pissed. But because I did it in my 30s after I'd kind of gotten over the people-y thing, and then especially with COVID, when that happened, I was so glad to get out of the big city and come to a small town like I am now. But yeah, that was the first time I ever really had an interaction with you, and I think actually maybe it might have been that year was also the first time I was ever on Shooting USA, because I had a camera on my hat, and you asked me for the footage, and we used it for the episode. So
I remember that. And that's, as technology has evolved, like everybody wears a camera on their hat now. Like everybody's got the little brim eye shot cameras now. But dude, back then it was like the cameras were clunky, and GoPros were just starting to become what they are. They really weren't anything good at that time. And, my POVs were the Sony disposable palm quarters, which we still use from time to time, because honestly, people joke all the time and always have, oh, what happens if that gets shot? What happens if that camera gets shot? I'm like, well, here's the deal. If it's not rolling, then I'll be sad about it. Like, I'll be upset. If it's not on when it gets shot, then I'm sad about it. If it's on and it gets shot, I'm like, awesome, dude, because at this point, those cameras have had so much time in the field. They have paid for themselves over and over again. And essentially a Sony palm quarter now, one of those little palm quarters, is less than $200. And they really do make really nice video if you position them correctly and make it look right. It works really, really well. But that's that was my shtick back in the day. I would see guys like you who had figured out a way to mount a camera on themselves for their own purposes. We'd film the run with our television cameras and my POVs and the things that I would be setting. And then I would hit people up and be like, hey man, can I get a transfer of your data? I mean, that's been a staple. And I've been so fortunate to get some great video over the years from all sorts of different events and all sorts of different things, just simply networking in that way. Yeah, it's good, man. It's fun.
And as technology has advanced, and these cameras are getting smaller, the quality gets better. A lot of them have like image stabilization built into them now, which is awesome. Yeah. There's another aspect to your job, which is being the host of Shooting USA, that I thought was I appreciated your approach and your mindset behind it, and that's that. While you do great work in front of the camera, you also do really good work behind a gun. And you took a step into saying, no, you do, right? I mean, let's be honest. Like,
well, I appreciate that. I think you're overselling it a little bit, but the idea of getting involved from my side of the, I'm the guy who is bringing shooting sports to your television or your video screen, however you consume your media. I'm spreading the good news of the shooting sports. I'm showing you the best in the nation, the best in the world in many cases, in all of these different disciplines. I'll show you the products related to it. I'll find some guys and girls who will do what we call pro tips, and we've been so wildly successful with those because it's professional instruction that the audience, the novice shooter, needs and wants. And, it's just the tip of the iceberg in many places, but taking the next step, which is to say, all right, I am not going to take myself so seriously that I won't participate in these events that we're at. I will do it at my skill level, whatever that may be, low, initially U and D and maybe C, B in a couple of divisions after a few years. But I will do it at my skill level so that the audience can understand, one, I don't take myself so seriously that I won't be embarrassed by the best in the world. I won't be embarrassed by club shooters. I'm going to go out and show you what my experience is doing it. I'm going to show you how it goes wrong for somebody at my skill level, or in some cases, how it goes right. And then that gives everyone in the audience the understanding that you can do it too. And quite honestly, that is one of the biggest one of the biggest things for me that really validate the work and the time and the travel and, you know, the stress and the heat and the dust and the rain and everything else that goes along with it. Because it is a job, and it does consume a lot of time, and it takes me away from my family, and it takes me away from things that I could be doing at home when I'm not at home. The number one thing that validates all of that investment is when someone comes to me at a match, no matter what the match is, and says, hey man, I love your show, and I'm here because I saw you doing it, or I'm here because I saw it on your show. That for me is the payoff. And expanding the shooting sports, continuing to spread the good news of, you know, safe, fun, and essentially effective training through sport that's literally the mission of Shooting USA. And I love it when I hear people say that.
Well, and that was exactly what I was going to bring up, because, you know, one of the downsides to, you know, like I obviously I love shooting competition, or else I wouldn't have been doing it for as long as I have, and I wouldn't have put as much time and energy and effort and blood, sweat, and tears into it as I have. But the downside is that whenever I try and invite people to come shoot a match with me, the first thing they do is they go to my page and they watch me shoot, and they go, oh, well, I can't do that. And it's like it already right there off the bat, they're starting off with the, well, I don't want to go there and look like an idiot or have people laugh at me or judge me. And
I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to do the wrong thing. And I've, you know, that's part of what I think me participating in it at my level, which is admittedly way off the pace of those that we present to you as world and national champions in Shooting USA's like premier coverage of whatever event we're at. That says to people, you can do it. No, there's 400 people at this match. 25 of them are elite level and have a shot at winning this thing, but the other 375 of them are competing against themselves, the clock, others within their same skill level in their division. And that's the interesting piece. It's challenging within the, you know, roughly 3 segments, 16 or so minutes of coverage of a nationals for me to look away from the guys and girls that are going to take down the championship and look towards, let's say, the heated race in, you know, C class for those guys. You know, I mean, they're dicing it up in C, and we got a guy who's breaking out and looks like he's going to get a match bump into B. Where's he going to stack up in B? If time wasn't a limiter when it comes to presenting our show within the format of the network, we could go on about that all day, like absolutely all day. And again, it's one of those things. It's important to talk to everybody who's involved, everybody who wants to be there. The person I really want to get is that guy or that girl, you know, that family maybe that's thinking I could do it. Maybe I won't this time. I don't know. Maybe I could. Maybe those are the people that I want to like tip the scale for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, like I said, like you said, like it's an interesting dynamic that we always have to play with, because like you said, like, yeah, you know, 10 to 15% of the shooters at a national level match are the elite people that maybe have a potential to win. But I remember being a B class shooter and like freaking out over the results, being like, oh my God, this other B class shooter is, I'm only 10 points ahead of him. Like, yep. It's still a competitive environment, even though
100%,
even though I'm not a GM.
Well, I can speak to that too. Having, you know, having just shot, well, not just shot, but had the last big USPSA Nationals I shot was the PCC and production match, and I shot a PCC, and I was just squad. I typically will not squad. You know, I don't anymore like to squad with, you know, select group. I just want to be put somewhere. and hopefully there's people who are of my similar skill level or whatever, so just put me with people, and that's how I make new friends. That's how I meet people on the range, whatever. And this year that was the case. And it was interesting because Kenzie Fitzpatrick was on the squad. She's a jam up PCC shooter, one of the top ladies. And, she was watching the scores as the match was winding down, and she was looking at other girls specifically that she was trying to edge out. And it was interesting to see that for her. She's not going to catch Justine, obviously. I mean, Justine was second overall in the match. Justine beat Scott Green. Justine beat Josh Freilich. Like, I'm naming legit. Justine beat John McClain.
She
smoked us. And it simply doesn't make sense, but it makes sense. I mean, she's that good, right?
Yeah.
If Max Leograndis had not shown up, Justine is your PCC national champion. You know what I mean? And yikes. But regardless of the fact, this, A-class PCC shooter on my squad is looking at the rest of the girls and like fighting for every point to see if she can catch the podium, and literally missed the podium. I think it was less than maybe a match point. It was so incredibly close. And her skill level, her ability to break down a stage translates when you spend 3 half days in a match with somebody, admittedly way beyond my skill level, but still willing to share a stage plan, willing to talk through how it should go, how it does, and always super, super supportive, like everybody is. And that's what's cool about the thing. If you don't want the stage plan, fine, dude, figure it out on your own. Good luck. And you'll end up like me on day one. Not that I turned down the stage plan, but I'm working on getting the crew going on other stages, and I'm like, didn't get a chance to really walk the first stage that we shot. And okay, now we're going to shoot this first stage. You got pre-match jitters. You haven't really felt the gun yet, and you really don't have a stage plan that goes beyond the first 2 positions, and there's 4 positions beyond. Well, those 4 positions beyond, you're going to end up shooting targets twice. And I ended up putting that in the show because, the crew came around and there was multiple cameras, and you can see me hesitantly working my way up the side of the stage, and I shoot the same target in the back twice. And, you walk off that stage, and after the cameras have gone away and they got my reaction, the better shooters in that squad, including Kinsey, are like, okay, dude, you need to work on your stage plan. What was that? You're better than that. And that's that encouragement piece that gets me to a point where the rest of the match, the rest of those days, it was steady improvement. And that's what I want to get across to people is you're not going to come out and win your division. You're not going to come out and win the national, but you will come out and you will improve, and you will learn something every single time you do it. And as long as you continue to build on that body of knowledge, that level of experience continues to increase for everybody. And literally all of the ships will rise with that tide. And that's the piece. Yeah. Lots of talking, man. I just get going on stuff.
No, it's good. I like it because it shows obviously that you're passionate about it. And to your point, how cool would it be if you showed up at, TPC Sawgrass and you were able to say, hey, I'm just the one someone, I need to get in a group, and they go, oh, okay, cool. Tiger Woods just pulled up. We'll throw you in his group. And while maybe that happens in the golf course, I don't know, because I don't have enough money to ever play TPC Sawgrass. But in the shooting world, I can tell you, I mean, sometimes you'll get people that are just like, oh my God, I'm squatted with Jerry Michalik. I'm squatted with Nils Jonassen. What am I doing here? And it's like, that's a cool experience for a shooter to be able to, all these people they see in the magazines and the TV shows and stuff. Now they're squatted with them. And then throughout their interaction, they realize like, wow, like every morning Nils comes up and says hi and asks me how I'm feeling today. And told me that I shot really well yesterday or is giving me pointers and tips. And it's like, that's a very different dynamic that I don't see in many other professional sports. And then there's also the dynamic of when you're at that elite level, all the top guys, we're talking our stage plans through. No one's hiding anything. No one's like, no, this is my plan. I'm not. You go mess up, and then I'll show you mine, and you'll be like, oh man, why didn't I think? That doesn't happen. We all share stage plans. We all will argue ideas of being like, no, I think going to this position first is slower because of this. Well, yeah, like we kind of bounce ideas off of each other. We try and find what works. Sometimes we all end up on the same stage plan. Sometimes everyone ends up on a different one, and we see where the dice fall. But then there's also the aspect of, man, if your gun breaks, normally it's the people in your squad are the first people to say, what do you need? I've got some extra parts. Let's, like, hey, well, your safety broke. Okay, let's go see if mine fits. Like, dude, any other sport, they'd be like, oh, your 7-iron broke? Yeah. Tough. I guess you're playing
Good
either.
luck.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
try that in Formula One. Try that in NHRA drag racing. Try that in any other form of mechanical racing. Which, let's face it, that's what this is. We're racing the guns. The guns are the race car, if you will. To your exact point, at PCC Nationals, at the end of day 2, when I'm on this ride, like I'm really getting into my flow, and I'm feeling good about this, and I break a firing pin after the 5th shot on the last stage for the day. But what is remarkable about that, I mean, that stage is a complete throwaway, and thankfully it wasn't a complete 0, but it was pretty dang close, and it hurt. The guys from Da Vinci are there. They've already, this is the end of the afternoon session, so they've already kind of packed everything up, and they're getting ready to leave. But I'm like, I didn't know to ask directly, but thankfully, through people realizing, oh man, firing pin, the guy from Da Vinci opens up his Tupperware that he's packed all of his stuff to sell away for the night, and he hands me a firing pin. Here's a brand new firing pin. And he wouldn't take money for it. I mean, yeah, granted, it's like a $15 or an $18 part, like a $20 part. I'm trying to put a 20 in his pocket, and I'm like handing him the 20, and he won't take it. Like, he's like, nah, man, just take care of it. Just go ahead, go fix your gun, no problem. It's never been a thing. And that's one of the things that's unique about the shooting sports as a whole. And it's not just, the practical sports. It's not just IPSC, USPSA. It's in the PRS. It's the same thing in the PRS. Guys have a scope go down, and, many people have extras, and they will literally either let you shoot an extra rifle or whatever. It's been that way, in my experience, across the board in all of the shooting sports. There is a level of competitiveness, admittedly, but there is also the value to actually having a legitimate win. You don't want to beat somebody because their gun broke, and that's not a way to take a win. And that's one of those things that it speaks to the sportsmanship at every level, and it includes, that includes the club level. Guys don't want to just, I don't know. I guess it's one of those things. They'll give you the shirt right off of their back, and everybody's really been known to do that. I've never seen anything that didn't completely represent that level of camaraderie, family, and sportsmanship. And in the few events that you ever had somebody who was ever not in lockstep with that, those people are weeded out pretty quick. You don't see them come back.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And no, I'll put it this way. So me growing up, my family we had a firearm incident when I was young that turned the family into an anti-gun family, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so naturally, as soon as I turned 18, I went and bought a rifle. And then as soon as I turned 21, I went and bought a handgun, started shooting competitions, stuff like that. But if I would have known that the first time I ever went to go shoot a gun, it was going to affect my life as much as it did, I would have called you up and said, hey, can you bring the film crew out to film me? Because this is going to be a life-changing experience, and I want to make sure I have it on camera, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, and the friendships, again, it's kind of funny because everyone, when you say you're a professional shooter or that you shoot a sponsored level shooter or whatever, really what that means is that you're a professional resetter and you occasionally shoot, but most of the time, like, you're also a professional hanger-outer.
That's right.
And anyone that's ever been to a match where, you had a squad, maybe there's people that were lazy, no one ever resets, everyone just wants to sit back and chill in the shade. Like, that can be a miserable experience. Even though the stages are great and the match is fun, like, the interaction you have with those people is making this experience bad. But I mean, when you really think about it, we spend 3 days to shoot for a total of 7 minutes.
Yeah.
But, like, to have that interact, like obviously there's something about it we like, and it's not the shooting, because that's such a minuscule part of the match experience. It's the friendships, it's the jokes, it's the bragging rights that you get to talk. Yeah, I remember, when I first started shooting with Nils, obviously he was smoking me left and right, and I made a promise to him that I was like, look, next year at Area 2, I'm going to beat you on at least one stage. It's going to happen. And he was like, yep, we'll see it when it happens. And next year, I sure enough was able to edge him out on one stage. And I was just like in his face constantly like, oh, you said it wasn't going to happen, but here it is, sucker. Next year, 2 stages. And the year after that, I beat him on 2 stages. And the joke I made was like, Nils, in like 7 or 8 more years, I'm going to win this match from you because at that rate,
Well,
but and it didn't happen because he obviously kept getting better too. But no, it's just not. It's a very, very interesting environment to be in, and I'm very thankful that I took the chance to go out and make myself look like an idiot. I'm saying quotation fingers here because it's really, everyone wants you to just be safe. They want you to have fun. They want you to have a good experience because they want you to keep coming back. And it's not because of, we need this guy's match fee money. Trust me, if anyone could tell you anything about it, there's not money to be made necessarily in the shooting sports, right? Like we're all doing it for fun. And I think the other thing too is like the level of competency that you gain about the firearm and how to be a responsible firearms owner is priceless. That skill set, the ability to handle your firearm under pressure of the clock and on competition, and yet you can do it in a safe manner where you are constantly able to be thinking about what you're doing and understanding the consequences of this action and that action. I mean, that stuff to me is priceless. So for anyone that has never tried to shoot a match, absolutely, I suggest going out and just doing it at a local level. I promise you, no one is going to laugh at you. No one's going to make fun of you unless they're already your friend.
Well,
but it can literally be a life-changing event. You could go from never shooting a match in your life to all of a sudden that's what you want to do. You want to get you want to get some companies to support you, that you like their product, so that you can go out and represent it on the circuit. And it's been an unreal ride so far.
Well, better yet, you bring people in who have specialties or have careers in businesses or in fields of expertise that are not related to the firearms industry and the shooting sports. They get involved in the shooting sports, and then they look at it from that analytical standpoint, where maybe they're a computer programmer, maybe they do higher end video production, maybe they do who knows what, machine work, anything that then could have fresh eyes or a fresh idea about some aspect that could grow what the shooting sports are, how the shooting sports work, a new product, a new take on something. So the world we live in right now in terms of technology is evolving so quickly, and trying to keep up with it when it comes to cameras is something that I have really started paying attention to, because the biggest problem that I'm faced with for my audience, whether they're an educated competitor in any of the practical sports or they're just somebody who's watching for entertainment, the biggest challenge that I'm faced with is helping them understand the scoring in as close to real time as possible. And for me, that's done all in post-production. But there's always this question of how can you make it something that people can see? How can you make it something that people can understand in real time? And that was the driving force behind the original Steel Challenge, and then later the Pro-Am pistol format where steel falls down. If you see somebody shooting fast, like even somebody who's uneducated can understand the difference between fast shooting and measured shooting, if you will. Fast shooting with hits on steel have an immediate audible feedback. When you hear 5 fast shots and 5 fast dings on steel, that was fast. And typically there's a display that shows a clock, and you can tell if a clock is showing a faster time than the other or whatever. That's very rudimentary when it comes to it. But that level of understanding for the observer, even the casual observer, is what I'm trying to take further steps forward with when it comes to USPSA and IPSC and how we present that product within the show, how that product is presented. And what I'm finding interesting is there are a number of good follows in social media, and there's one in particular, and the guy's last name is Rodriguez. I'm pretty sure. I think I'll flip this through here. I don't want to get distracted, but the reason I'm bringing this guy and his feed up is he films himself with a GoPro that's attached to his ear protection, and he then takes that video in post-production, in his own post-production. Yeah. Okay. So his handle is Make Ready. His name's Anthony Villanueva. He's off the West Coast guy. And he, in post-production, will take his video from his GoPro, and he will then put his target scores as you see him shooting the targets through the GoPro after fact, right?
Okay, yep.
And so I've reached out to him. I'm like, what's your setup? How are you doing that? And he's like, it's a GoPro session. I'm like, that's awesome, dude. It looks fantastic. It looks rock solid because it's attached to his ear protection. And then I'm like, how do you go about doing that? You know, where your scores on targets. And he's like, it's just something I do in post-production. I just do it with the editing software. So for me, it's like, okay, how do I take that inspiration and give him full credit? You know, I mean, I've messaged with him. I'm talking about him right now. But how do I refine that even further and polish it and then present it to the Shooting USA audience? That's the next level. That's the next step for me, because the alternative is something that I think people are trying to work on as well. And that is a target that immediately shows you from a distance how it's been hit, what the scores are on the target. And the benefit for the observer at that point makes this just a little bit more of a spectator sport, if you will. The other challenge is how do you put it in front of a crowd? How do you get crowds who can understand it in real time and see it? Because now when you have crowds, you have excitement, you have cheering, but you also have butts in seats, and butts in seats bring dollars, and dollars mean you have money to fund these things. So these are the elements that I'm excited to be exploring as technology continues to evolve, even in the last couple of years, the way the technology has changed. So, yeah, it's fun. It's a good time.
Well, and because to your point, yeah, it's like it's very difficult to get someone excited about going out to watch a USPSA event for 3 days, especially when like, oh yeah, okay, so they hit that steal, but what about the paper? I don't know what they did, right? Like right. I always joke, all my hits are alphas on video, even though they're misses and stuff like that. But there was when I looked into it, remember that show Top Shot that was super popular on History Channel for a couple years ago now. Christ, it's more than a couple. But one of the things that I think was so captivating from an audience standpoint for that show was the fact that the audience knew when they hit the target because the targets exploded. The glass broke. There was an instant. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, shoot that paper target, and when the shoot and see crackles away, like you hit it. It was something like, oh yes, that's definitely a hit. Now let's move on to the next thing. And yeah, it's interesting. Like I can understand Steel Challenge from that perspective, but like how many times can you watch someone shoot the same 8 stages 5 times in a row, and
right.
like it can just be so like blah. And I almost feel like we were making so much headway in the shooting sports when 3-Gun Nation was a thing.
Yep. They had a good model. They had the reactive targets, the Claybirds bust, they turn to dust. The falling steel at distance, distance rifle shots on a plate rack, a very easy to understand, only 3 scoring zones on a very large, very easy to understand target for pistol. Like they had a good thing going. And unfortunately, well, I think the other element that they put in place that I admire very much is that they would do it in such a way that you could see it. I mean, you were involved in it behind the scenes, like you were one of the competitors. I never set foot in one of their arenas at one of their events because, frankly, at that time, their competition. There's a small amount of advertising dollars that we as a production company rely on to bring Shooting USA to the television or to the cable network, and they dipped into that pond and they had their run, let's say, but it was in a couple of instances, it was at our expense. So, be that as it may, no hard feelings. I'm happy for everybody to have business. I'm also happy to see somebody else's take on a shooting sport. And I think they were successful to the point where they weren't. And there's something to be said for the fact that we have continued, and we are entering our 30th year of broadcasting shooting sports on television, one form or another, under one name or another. Under the name Shooting USA, we are in our 19th season. So, Oof. There's not a lot of TV shows that make it that far, and unless you're talking like The Simpsons or Wheel of Fortune. And when you throw in the whole polarizing element of firearms, it becomes even more narrow scope. So anyway,
yeah,
to your point,
that's the difficult thing is the big scary gun, because that's the platform we use for the sport. Like, it's always interesting to me that to get outside sponsors would be like the next step. But you look at some of these companies that we've reached out to, and this is from way back in the past, again, Three Gun Nation kind of era when it was starting to become popular. It was on MSNBC and all kind of stuff, or NBC Sports Network or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. They're on NBC Sports, yep.
And you'd hit up a company like Red Bull, and they'd be like, "Oh, you guys are fire? No, thanks. We don't want to touch that." And it's like
100%.
You sponsor events where guys literally drive their bicycle off the side of a mountain doing flips and stuff,
right.
And that's
right.
It's like that's not dangerous. Like you're encouraging these kids to try and
I mean, I can speak to that to a certain extent because I was involved. I was on Brian Connolly's Behind the Lens podcast, and we unpacked this question of how you get mainstream advertising dollars to come in so that you can do mainstream production type things where you would have a budget of mid six figures for an event to bring a production truck and bring multiple cameras and really make it look like like take any college sport. The March Madness, the SEC tournament's kicking off right now in Nashville at the Bridgestone Arena, and they've got 4 production trucks down there because they've got 10 cameras on the floor, and they've got remote, and they've got guys and girls doing immediate interviews. How do you get a budget like that for a practical shooting sport? Well, you have to have mainstream dollars. The problem is you have the companies, even companies that would be interested. Like I spoke about this on Brian's podcast. We had a gentleman who is he is the owner. He is the name of a particular pizza company that is nationwide, that is bigger than, they're as big as any of them. And he is into shotgun sports, and he and Jim met and he had a friendly conversation, and they talked about what does it look like to have this company involved with Shooting USA. And he came to the meeting to look at the proposal, and his attorneys were with him, and his attorney flat out sat there across the table, and he said, "You can't afford the negative press that will come from this." And, our only retort to that is, well, the firearms industry and the shooters and everybody who is into 2A and all of that are fiercely loyal and will support. And he's like, the attorney's just like, it's, 10,000 people love it and 5 vocal people from the other side hate it. The negative press will get so much traction, it's not worth it. And they had to pass, unfortunately. That's the problem. It's going to be polarizing, and it always will be because it is a political divide. Like, it's as big as any other political position you could take. And this one actually it could be theoretically even bigger. So the question becomes, how do you move away from the need for that level of funding and do it as a good steward of the dollars that are available within the industry? And that has been how we've gotten to the point where we are now, and what I hope we will be able to explore with some new potential ideas that are very close to becoming real. If you look at what BASS, so BASS, right, the pro fishing thing. They have now MLF, or Major League Fishing, which is a big deal. And they draw big outside sponsors like boat companies and engine companies and trucks. But interestingly enough, one of the big firearms manufacturers goes and puts some money in Major League Fishing. And they do that because it rates. How do we get those dollars out of the fishing boat and back into the gun world, back into actual shooting sports? Because you're not going to see one of their products in an episode. I'm not going to name the company, but you're not going to see one of their products in an episode of Major League Fishing. You'll see their logo on the side of a guy's boat. That's it. Nobody's going to pull a big mouth bass and then whip out there, I'm not going to name the company, and blast that bass. That's not how it's done, dude.
Or even just pose with it. Like, yeah, that's a beautiful fish while they're holding whatever it is.
So from a marketing standpoint, the only reason that money is over there, and I know it's significant money, I know it is. I mean, we're talking a lot of money to be over there. The only reason it's over there is because it rates. So how do we make something related to the practical pistol sports rate? We make it understandable immediately. We put a headline like Three Gun Nation did. Again, I admire a lot of things they did. And one of the big things that they were very successful with is they put headline money on the line. You know, if I tell you 50 grand is on the line for the final, we're going to do multiple lead-up events leading into this thing in a very simple format that's fast and flashy and easy to immediately understand. And we've got sponsored dollars that will get us headline money. Headline money makes people pay attention. And the final, if it's done the way it needs to be done, will look right and will have a big paycheck attached to it. And that will be the proof of concept that then gets that rating, that then makes it marketable for a company that otherwise would spend their significant advertising dollars elsewhere. That's the point. That's the way it's done. And that's what I'm very excited to be literally on the cusp of. Like in the next 45, 60 days, we'll know if this thing's going to happen.
Oh, nice. So, okay.
Exciting times.
Keep our eyes open for that.
Exciting times.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I think was the biggest selling point for the popularity of Three Gun Nation 2 was it wasn't just the simplicity of shooting their matches, but it was the shoot off. Everyone wanted to make it to the shoot off because it just looked fun as hell. And I can tell you from
100%.
being one of the competitors that was in the shoot off, it is fun as hell. And I'm actually surprised that that's not something that has become a more regular thing to do, just because, I mean, like I said, it's just really fun to go up, call out a buddy, be able to like, yo, I'm calling you out, let's go, and boom, okay, let's run, let's shoot, and whoever finishes first wins. You know,
from what I understand, they have an event that looks like that's going to be a part of this World Pistol Championship that's going on the Affinity ranges in Texas. In a couple of brief conversations, it's turned out that they're not in a position to have us come, which is fine, understandable. However, I have done now 2 lead episodes from the Utah Airguns Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge, which is a precision air rifle competition that has a number of different traditional air rifle events, but has incorporated their own version of a shoot-off that they call the speed event. And there's money available, and they get a crowd because everybody who's there has shot earlier to try to make it into the speed event, and it boils down to the top 16. I've presented it twice in Shooting USA, and I cannot explain how electric that atmosphere is when you've got head-to-head racing on targets that you can immediately see the reaction from. And granted, they're small because they're air rifle, but they're pretty close because, again, they're air rifle. And you've got 200 or so people on bleachers sitting around watching it. It's literally edge of your seat action, and you can watch it on the coverage that we've done in the last 2 years that we've been to that event on Shooting USA. And I'm constantly looking at how do we make something that looks like that and feels like that with a crowd, but incorporates other disciplines. That's the question. And we're not far from it, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, and obviously there's some sort of magical, formula that's out there, because you can't, like, don't get me wrong, I love swinging a golf club. How the crap is golf so popular to watch on TV? You know what I mean? Like every round is coming. So as a golfer, I understand, but from someone that doesn't appreciate it, they would probably just be like, There's a lot of guys just swinging clubs and hitting balls into holes. Like, why are they getting paid so much money? Like,
There's a
if you
lot
don't,
there's a lot of crossover, I think, when it comes to the recreational players. And there are some similarities related to the fact that if you're going to have a gun range, you're going to have to occupy some ground. You're going to have some dedicated construction in the form of your berms and your ground, and it takes money to build that. And just like a golf course has dedicated, it takes money to have a golf course too. There's plenty of money in golf. There's tons of money in golf, and that's the thing. Anybody who knows, if you buy a set of golf clubs, or you go and buy a three-wheel cart that carries your golf bag, or you buy anything related to the sport, there's a premium markup to it just because that's part of the sport.
Right on. Well, we're coming around to about an hour here. Now, I do want to bring up one thing, and this is something that I wanted to bring up because obviously with you and your expertise, you and your family, you've been doing the network TV show. I mean, your dad, if I remember correctly, was he on the news side initially?
Yeah, he was actually, well, he started in radio in when we lived in Hawaii. My mother was a flight attendant, and her family is from Hawaii, and he got his news radio gig there that evolved into his on-camera news gig, which immediately took us to Phoenix, Arizona. And back in the day, the CBS affiliate Channel 3 was Eyewitness 3 then. They have since lost the CBS affiliation, that network, but he was the anchor. The Monday through Friday, 5, 6, and 10 p.m. CBS news anchor in Phoenix for all the years that I was in elementary school. And so I was exposed to that level of television production in the early 80s, where there was no digital production at that time. So one of the big things that I would do, I would get to go with him to the station on Fridays. Like, I'd go after school, and he'd do the 5, and then he'd do the 6, and then we'd go and have dinner, and then I'd hang around with the graphics arts guys in the graphic arts room, where they would make these big boards. Like, they would make the graphic art that went up in set, because back then, early 80s, there was no digital art that went on. Like, they were on the cutting edge at that time with a chroma key background for Jim Howell, who was the weather guy. And I was fascinated by that, because Jim would show me, the other Jim would show me, stand here, you see this, it looks green, but when the camera when the camera sees it, I look over here and I see this screen that shows the map and the things that I'm pointing to. And that's how I know what I'm pointing at. And I was, I was a little kid. I was 10, 11 years old. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. Look at all this. And then, there were other shows within that network, or within that particular station and network, that Jim produced. He was very close with the Humane Society, just because we happened to have a neighbor that lived on the same cul-de-sac as us in Phoenix, who was one of the directors of the Arizona Humane Association. It's part of the Humane Society. So he had done some investigative work on the dog fighting back in the mid 80s there. And we went on a couple of trips north of Flagstaff when there was hard freezes, to help farmers that had like their ponds frozen over and cows weren't able to drink, and different things like that. Like, as an extension of the Humane Society, they also did a program called Pets on Parade. And that's where I first turned up on television with our dog that we'd gotten a lab puppy. This preceded and this is one of those shows which they've been duplicated thousands of times since then, where, the local humane shelter brings through, a dozen different dogs over the course of the half-hour show that are up for adoption this weekend. Meet Ace and meet Fluffy and this, and they really have success getting people to come get these dogs and cats out of the shelters. But that was where I first turned up on television, because we worked with a guy who did simple obedience training, and, in a couple of obedience training sessions with this lab puppy, I was showing how you can do, sit, stay, come, heel commands, things like that, as a 10 and 11-year-old on TV. And that then led into one of the things that Jim did as a docu-series, and it's called Charlie the Dog Nobody Wanted. And it's an interesting thing, because that dog came out of the Humane Association. We adopted that dog from the Humane Society. She was a border collie. Charlie was a female. And through the 5 nights of this docuseries, you see Charlie's life in sort of, I don't know, it was drama, but it was also fiction in that, she belonged to a family. She had to be abandoned. She got picked up. She follows a kid home that she sees at a school. Well, that kid happens to be me because I'm feeding her bologna out of my lunchbox. And then she ends up getting picked up by the Humane Association. She goes to a shelter. Nobody wants to adopt her. And then in the final episode, she gets the blue shot. And people were mortified that, they'd killed this dog on news. And then, it flashes forward and there's Jim and Charlie. And he said, the good news is this is just a story. This is the version that, Charlie lives with us now. She's our dog, but understand thousands of dogs around the world, around the country have to go through this. And he won all kinds of awards related to that production back then. I actually have a copy that I took off of beta and digitized, and I put it on my YouTube channel, which is funny because it turns up people have found it, not on the Shooting USA YouTube channel. So if you search if you search Charlie the dog nobody wanted on YouTube, you'll get it, and you'll see me at, I don't know, I think I was 10. I might have been 11. I might have been 11 when we did that production. I mean, it's pretty hilarious. But yeah, it was very much Jim coming out of television news, working a number of different jobs across the country, because news is one of those things. You move. The idea is to move to a bigger market, a bigger city, and so on. And he finally got to a point where he was like, I'm done with this. I'm done with fighting over TV news. I'm done with fighting for a bigger market. I'm done with the politics involved. I'm done with, ownership changes and things that are just ridiculous that people who go that route have to deal with. And he moved out into, he located himself here in Nashville at that time, with a production company that was doing a video magazine related to country music. So this was on the cusp of VHS becoming DVD. There was no such thing as the internet. This was like 88, 89. And there was this little startup company was going to deliver a monthly subscription where instead of getting a paper magazine out of your mailbox, you would get a VHS tape and you could watch, news packages created about country stars and different things in country music. And it failed miserably because it was not at the right time. You know what I mean? And I don't think it would have worked if it were on DVD, but it was one of those things. It was on VHS and people were wanting DVD. And even if it was on DVD, I think it was too close to the beginning of what network programming was going to be providing on stations like CMT at the time and different things like that. Like, it was built for that, but it would come in your mailbox. And people never really understood. But because of that, he was here and able to network with the production company that created American Shooter. They were originally doing the automotive programming, which that production company still exists and still does. And he was doing freelance work for them, doing automotive reviews. And, that was working well. I was still in high school. And they then developed the American Shooter concept and had produced a couple of things for ESPN before it was bought by Disney, and they had secured Chuck Connors, the rifleman, to be the host. And unfortunately for Chuck, he passed away right before that production went underway. And at that point, they're like, well, who can we get to do it? And Jim was like, yo. And they put Jim in place, and people liked him. People liked his delivery, and, it went from there, and we all were learning on the fly, and that's where I got my start. That's the first time I was around organized shooting competition. It was an IRC in California, and I was carrying one bag of tapes, and the other bag on my other hip was full of batteries, and I had a tripod over my shoulder, and I thought I had a VHS sleeve from when we were distributing American Shooter on VHS. I have one somewhere, but in the cover art, there's a picture of me in black and white set into all these other photos, but there's a picture of me holding all that crap. And it's funny because it's not firearms related, but I don't know why it ended up in the cover art. So anyway, I'll have to dig that up. I've talked about it many times, but that's where it started, man. And we'd had exposure to firearms. When we lived in Phoenix, we would go out to the desert, and we would plink. We would ride three-wheelers, and he had a Smith & Wesson kit gun, a little .22 revolver that we still have. It's here in the collection. But that's the gun that I learned to shoot on. I learned sight alignment. I learned muzzle discipline. I learned all of the 4 firearm safety rules. My brother learned on that gun, and my stepbrother learned on that gun. So, it's one of those things. That was where exposure to firearms started, but the exposure to competitive shooting sports didn't happen until the early 90s and the beginning of American shooter.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? Like it's just funny how one path can lead you to something else, and then it just,
I'm telling you.
It seems it's like, oh yeah, I'll take a chance, I'll take a shot, and the next thing it's like, whoa, crap, okay, here we go, we've got something, and then next thing you're like, there's so much to learn, and I only have the brain capacity for so much. So,
right.
Right on. All right, well, I've got a couple fast fire questions that we'll end off with, and then
let them rip.
We'll do our final sign off. So, with that being said, let's start off. What is the worst present you have ever received?
Like the worst gift? Like a gift is what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Present?
But
okay.
Even if it could be
we
a
joke
gag
about
gift
this
or whatever.
Yeah, no. This was, I think my wife meant well, but she got me a make beer at home kit, like a beer making kit. And nah, dude, not for me. We laugh about that. We laugh about that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Home beer making
right.
kit. Like you make beer in your bathtub. No thanks.
Yeah. Is it wrong for vegetarians to eat animal crackers?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my wife's a vegetarian, not by choice, but by kind of composition. And if she could, she would eat bacon all the time. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a I will say this, there's a caveat to that question. If you're a vegetarian because you are that way, because you believe it's cruel to eat any kind of an animal, or animals have feelings, animals are not food, then no, dude, you're not allowed to eat animal crackers. You have to stick to Nilla wafers. Sorry.
Right. Yes, exactly. All right. Neat or on the rocks?
Oh, for whiskey, neat. For tequila, pellet ice and 2 squeezes of limes.
Okay, well there you go.
But yeah, whiskey. Nothing else goes in the glass of whiskey, dude. My other glass has ice water or has club soda. A nice club soda. That's in the other glass. The whiskey sits in there by itself, dude.
I fully agree. And for those of you that say, well, what if you just want to chill it? Whiskey stones. They exist.
Well,
they're real.
I tried them. I don't care for them. Honestly, I really don't. And here's the thing. My buddy, he's a buddy of yours now, you got a nice package from him. He insists, and he knows because he's exposed to the highest levels, including Jimmy Russell, that many distillers intend for you to put a little water on the whiskey to open it up. And I get it, but they're like, but drink what you like. And that's what I like. Drink what you like. Yep. And that's what I like. So, absolutely under no circumstances are you allowed to put any kind of Coke or any kind of cola or anything like that on a quality bourbon. If you do that, we don't play cards.
We're not friends.
There's a funny story years ago, as a squire, when I was still drinking on the road, we would go and pick up a bottle of Gentleman Jack. And I had hired a guy at one time and this was before consumer, privately owned drones were a thing. I'd hired a guy to bring out his big commercial multi-prop drone to fly over an event in Florida. And I want to say it was U.S. Steel Nationals, I think, is the one we had him out for. And he was like, oh, okay, well, it was after the shoot, and it was in between days of the match. And it was like, well, we're going to slide by the liquor store. We're going to get a bottle of Gentleman Jack. And he's like, well, let me buy it. And I was like, all right, yeah, sure, you can buy it. And we sat down by the pool at the hotel, and we're having our little pregame. And, Randall's there. He's a squire, and we're enjoying that Gentleman Jack, and he's mixing it with Diet Coke. And I'm like, I looked at Randall at one point, and I was like, I'm not going to say anything because he bought the bottle, but you don't do that, dude. You just don't do that. Anyway, drink what you like. That's what I say. But yeah, lately I've gotten into tequila just because it has kind of a different effect after, if you will. There's a lot of sugar in bourbon that you don't necessarily realize. And that's, for me, what kind of causes what you would consider a hangover or a drag effect later. It's not really present for me in tequila, which is interesting. Anyway, yeah.
Okay.
Neat for sure, dude.
Perfect. All right. Would you rather have the power to teleport exactly 10 feet in any direction or to be able to change your hair color to a primary color only?
Yeah, teleport. What? Hair color? I don't understand. How is that a superpower? Anyway.
It's like, how's teleporting only 10 feet a superpower?
Well, it could be. I mean, if you can get through, I mean, theoretically, you're saying you can teleport through a wall, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be clear line of sight teleporting, or I mean, am I asking too many semantic questions?
Exactly 10 feet. Exactly
that's
10
fine.
feet.
Yeah, that's fine. No problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then last one. Would you rather fly with the Thunderbirds or drive an F1 car?
Yeah.
I know that's a good question because I don't know the answer. I was like, well,
I know this. I mean, everybody I'm sure has seen the episode of Top Gear where I think it was Hammond was trying to drive an F1 car and he couldn't get himself to get it going fast enough to get it to do its proper ground effect. But I also know, I think Indy has a 2-seater that you can take a ride with an actual driver in. So I feel like that's safer. Yeah. I would have to definitely go that route. I know some of those dudes that fly either Thunderbirds or Blue Angels or whatever, the exhibition jet pilot guys, like to get people in the back seat and like to knock them out. And that's not for me, dude. I'm gonna be 49 this year. That's not my game.
Hey, you look amazing for 49 there.
Thank you. Not 49 yet, but thank you. Thanks for the compliment.
48 and a half then, but whatever you are. So right on. Well, John, we're gonna wrap it up here. But is there anything else you'd like to add to the tail end of here? Anyone you want to say thanks to or anything? The floor is yours.
Well, I appreciate that. It sounds like the end of Hot Ones, like this camera, this camera, this camera. Tell people what you got going on in the world. I'm especially grateful and thankful for everyone who takes the time to pay attention to our program, to what we do. And I am especially grateful to all of the elite level competitors who give me access, guys like you that I can consider friends, but also guys that will tolerate our intrusion with cameras in the middle of you or them trying to focus as tightly as possible to potentially win, or in some cases, unfortunately, lose a national championship. That's not something that I take lightly. And I have worked very, very hard over the years to make sure that I never embarrass anybody. And I want to make sure that I maintain those relationships. And the same goes for all of the disciplines that allow us to come and produce our television show within their events, people that trust us to make everyone look good. From there, it's just one of those things. Stay tuned, man, because we are very close to launching something that I think is going to be very exciting. And, if you want to see more Shooting USA, we have a YouTube channel. If you don't have cable anymore, you can watch us on our Vimeo streaming. It's a very modest monthly fee. I think it's like $2. If you want to support the show via the YouTube channel, there's a Patreon now where you can see full-length episodes and you can see watch-along episodes like I've done with Nils. I've got another one coming for the new show that launches next week with Austin Bushman, who wins the PRS finale. And I'll be doing them as we continue to release new shows. If you saw this week's release on YouTube, it was the 21 Low Cap Nationals, where our host, the esteemed John McClain, makes an appearance on the podium in the single stack division. Very fun, very cool show. That's out there now. So yeah, look us up, man.
Awesome. Well, there you go. John Scoutten from Shooting USA. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and chat with me. And everyone else, man, thanks for tuning in. Hope you appreciate and enjoyed the podcast. I know I certainly did. It's out on the range. There's so much going on. You're working, you're shooting, I'm shooting. It's nice to be able to just sit down and chat for a bit.
Yeah, we could do this for hours. This was an easy one. I enjoyed the preloaded questions too. That was fun.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Right on, John. Thanks, dude.